The Strait of Hormuz, that narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the wider Indian Ocean, has been one of the most strategically significant maritime passages in the world for thousands of years. And if you're keeping up with current events, then I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. But the current conflict aside, this tiny passageway has a really interesting history, which we're going to cover in this video. Situated between the southern coast of Iran and the northern shores of the Arabian Peninsula, the strait forms the Persian Gulf's only natural outlet. At its narrowest, it spans just 30 to 35 kilometers, with even tighter shipping lanes. For millennia, this geography has made it a vital checkpoint, channeling trade, communication, and ideas between the Near East and the wider world. Today, that same corridor carries vast oil tankers to global markets. But there's more to this area than simply shipping. In the ancient world, the Persian Gulf, known locally as the Lower Sea, was already a lifeline of commerce, linking Mesopotamia, the Arabian Peninsula, Iran, and the distant Indus Valley civilization. By the 3rd millennium BC, merchants from cities like Ur and Lagash were sailing these waters in search of copper and diorite from Oman, as well as timber, precious stones, and luxury goods from lands further to the east. Any ship passing between Mesopotamia and the Indian Ocean had to pass through a narrow gateway, the waters which we now call the Strait of Hormuz, making it a vital corridor of trade even in the Bronze Age. As power in the Near East passed from one empire to another, control of the Persian Gulf and the strait itself shifted with it. Around 500 BC, the Achaemenid Persian king, Darius I, better known as Darius the Great, unified a vast territory stretching from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus River Valley. Under Persian rule, the Gulf became an imperial lifeline, linking distant eastern provinces with the empire's core in southwestern Iran and Mesopotamia. It was likely during the late Parthian or early Sasanian period in the 3rd century AD that the strait acquired a name resembling its modern one, Hormuz. The name is widely believed to derive from Hormuzd, the Middle Persian form of Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity of Zoroastrianism. Another explanation is that the word comes from Hur and Muz, which combined means place of dates. Recognizing the strategic importance of this maritime gateway, the Sasanian rulers extended their authority across both its northern and southern shores, effectively controlling access to the Persian Gulf itself. In this sense, Hormuz may be understood as something like the place of Ahura Mazda, or a passage under the protection of Ahura Mazda. Even distant powers were aware of the strait's significance. In 116 AD, the Roman Emperor Trajan reached the head of the Persian Gulf during his eastern campaigns. According to the classical historian Cassius Dio, he watched ships sailing toward India, and remarked that, had he been younger, he would have joined them. Every one of those ships passed through this narrow gateway, the waters which we now call the Strait of Hormuz. Following the rise of Islam in the 7th century, the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz became integrated into the rapidly expanding Islamic world. Muslim merchants dominated much of the Indian Ocean trade during the medieval period, and the Gulf served as an important hub connecting the Abbasid Caliphate and later Islamic states with markets stretching from East Africa to India and Southeast Asia. By the late medieval period, a powerful and remarkably cosmopolitan state emerged that would give the strait its modern name, the Kingdom of Hormuz. Originally located on the mainland of southern Iran, the kingdom was forced by regional instability and Mongol-era disruptions to relocate its capital to the island of Hormuz at the entrance of the strait, sometime in the 13th century. This move proved transformative. From its new island stronghold, Hormuz developed into one of the most important commercial hubs of Western and South Asia. The kingdom itself controlled little agricultural land and produced almost nothing of its own. Its wealth came from its location. Sitting astride the maritime crossroads between the Persian Gulf, India, East Africa, and the wider Islamic world, Hormuz became a clearinghouse for trade. Merchants from across Eurasia passed through its ports, bringing with them spices, textiles, pearls, precious metals, and ceramics. The rulers of Hormuz grew extraordinarily wealthy by taxing this commerce, while the city itself became famous for its luxury, diversity, and many vices. Visiting Hormuz around 1271 or 1272, the Venetian merchant Marco Polo later described Hormuz as a thriving emporium filled with goods from across the known world, telling us that merchants from India came there with ships loaded with all sorts of spices, precious stones, pearls, silk, gold, elephant's teeth, and many other exotic goods. Later observers echoed this impression of a glittering city of trade and wealth, sustained not by natural resources, but by its command of one of the most strategic maritime positions on Earth. It was this wealth and strategic location that ultimately drew the attention of the Portuguese in the early 16th century, setting the stage for the next great chapter of the history of the strait. In 1507, the Portuguese admiral Afonso de Albuquerque captured the island of Hormuz as part of Portugal's grand strategy to control the sea routes linking Europe with Asia. By establishing a fortress and naval base on the island, the Portuguese were able to exert considerable influence over shipping entering and leaving the Persian Gulf. Although local rulers and rival empires challenged Portuguese dominance, Portugal managed to hold on to Hormuz for more than a century. According to Francis Xavier, founder of the Jesuit order, who was later canonized as a saint, Hormuz was more or less the new Sodom and Gomorrah of his day. On his way to Japan, he stopped by Hormuz and is reported to have said, "Its moral state was enormously and infamously bad. It was the home of the foulest sensuality and of the most corrupted forms of every religion in the East. The Christians were as bad as the rest in the extreme license of their lives. There were few priests, but they were a disgrace to their name. The Arabs and the Persians had introduced and made common the most detestable forms of vice. Hormuz was said to be a Babel for its confusion of tongues, and for its moral abominations to match the cities of the plain. A lawful marriage was a rare exception. Foreigners, soldiers, and merchants threw off all restraint in the indulgence of their passions. Evil had become good, and it was thought good trade to break promises and think nothing of engagements." Portuguese control finally came to an end in 1622 when the Safavid Persian Empire, working in cooperation with the English East India Company, captured the island and expelled the Portuguese from the region. This event marked a shift in the balance of power in the Gulf. While the Safavids reasserted Persian authority along the northern coast, European colonial powers, most notably England and the Netherlands, began to expand their economic presence in the region. Over the following centuries, European merchants increasingly participated in the Gulf's trade networks, although local Arab and Persian powers continued to play important roles. By the 19th century, the British Empire had emerged as the dominant naval power in the Persian Gulf. Britain's interest in the region was driven largely by the need to protect the sea routes connecting Europe with India, the latter being the jewel of the British Empire. Through a series of treaties with local rulers along the Arabian coast, Britain established a network of protectorates and ensured that the Gulf remained under its strategic influence. The 20th century transformed the significance of the strait in ways that earlier generations scarcely could have imagined. The discovery of vast petroleum reserves across the Persian Gulf region, first in Iran in 1908, and later in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and other Gulf states, turned the region into the center of the global oil economy. As oil exports from the Gulf expanded dramatically after the Second World War, the Strait of Hormuz became the primary route through which tankers carried crude oil to markets in Europe, Asia, and North America. Today, roughly 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply passes through its narrow channels, along with approximately 20% of global liquefied natural gas. Furthermore, the region is a critical hub for global food security, accounting for nearly 30% of the world's traded urea and nitrogen-based fertilizers, with massive exports originating from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. So you can see why even a temporary disruption in the flow of goods through the strait can send immediate shockwaves through the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz has always been more than just a simple stretch of water. From ancient merchants to medieval kingdoms, from European empires to modern superpowers, control of this narrow passageway has carried enormous economic and political consequences. So, I hope that you learned a bit more about the Strait of Hormuz, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. I'd also like to thank the channel's patrons for making videos like this possible. These include, but are certainly not limited to, GrandKick69, Yap de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Daniel Allen, Danny Van Eck, Wenix TV, Robert Morgan, Strobex, Blitzkrieg, Krishnan Murali, Frank, Tim Lane, Sebastian Notaro Korea, Michael Trudell, Leader Titan, Micah G, John Scarberry, William O'Brien, Andrew Bomer, Connor Dolson, Krish, Ben Van Rijsvik, David R, Stephen Ball, Gabe, Monty Grimes, Franz Robbins, Cyrus Smear, Dianastra, Nimrod Nir, Hypnosan, Brendan Redmond, Faridun Dadachanji, Jimmy Daruwala, Enihita Debu, Gulasan Debu, Sher Kam, Farhad Kama, and all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and X, and continue to listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.